the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Hello and welcome to the Daily Australian. It is Monday, May the 26th, 2025, and you may recognise that this is episode 98. If you can believe that, just 2 away from the illustrious century where we will raise our bats and pat ourselves on the back for making it this far. I tell you what, this is the only place now to get the news and discussion, opinion, hard to take, but it's the only way to do it. Here in Australia, we are the best thing that has come out of 2025. How do I know that? Because we have got imitators, and that is the sincerest form of flattery. Nicola Charles, welcome to another week as we approach triple figures.
Yeah, it's exciting. It feels weird. I mean, it's just part of our life now, isn't it, doing this show? And I know for the audience, it's part of their lives as well. And it just feels kind of strange. I guess every business is like that, you know, it just goes poof and it starts from nothing. But it's very interesting. And what I like about this show is it's drawing lots of interesting people into our lives and real fighters, you know, real fighters in Australia. And you definitely get the vibe that there's a line in the sand and it's been crossed now and people are not going to take it anymore. And one of the things farmers were complaining to me about is the late arrival of these designation of floods in Australia, Jason, because if they delay and delay and delay, they don't have to pay this flood relief. And I know you're experiencing that where you are, right?
Yeah, look, in this part of the world in Maitland, it's kind of interesting because it was bad enough and there's plenty of floodplain areas, but we also get affected with the downstream runoff. So when the rain stops, you think that's as bad as it gets. No, it actually gets worse. So Saturday night here, the New England Highway, which is the main road in and out of Maitland and west of that to the Hunter Valley, actually got blocked after the rains had stopped. So we had a beautiful sunny day, and then you find out that you can't get home. You've got to take the long way around. So Sunday morning we headed out, and it took me, for what normally would be a 5-minute trip to get out of Maitland, was an hour going through the different back roads and bottlenecked. And I'll just give you an example here. So this is photographs taken on Saturday afternoon. So that's your South Maitland Railway landmark there. But if I zoom in, going down the street towards the building right down in the back centre there is the Hunter Trade College. Get a bit closer to it. You can start to see now the water up the road. It's kind of, you know, it's concerning. Now let's look closer at the school. Look at that. The water is literally leaping at the doorstep, so no one can get to school again this week. So it was all out last week and out again. Now, a little bit of a wide shot here. You can see the tops of our heads, but that gives you a little bit more of an example. Now, this here is the Hunter Valley, the Hunter River at Maitland. Oh. Now, you can see there's 2 kids riding their push bikes down to a bit of some driftwood there at the bottom there. That pathway normally goes all the way down, and it's been cut off there. So your Hunter Valley, your Hunter River's up about 2 to 3 meters rising. And this is a photograph of my balcony. Now, we do have a lagoon there out the back, but it's never that high. And you can probably see some marks there on the left there where the water line is. It was higher, so it's receded a little bit. It's since dropped again, but it rises sometimes 1 or 2 meters, which is substantial. But that gives you an idea of some of the water areas. So yeah, there are other parts where under the last election, the floods of 2022 of March, so they went into the election promising to build a new bridge in the area of Testers Hollow, and so they spent $17 million on raising the road. Well, that was underwater as well. So well done, Labor. Your new road is just as redundant as the old one. Just extraordinary. It just means that it'll be underwater for less of a time. But they couldn't build it any higher. It's just an example of, this is politicians. But, of course, they'll say that it was an overall success. But it just, if you're going to do the job, do it properly, for goodness sake. Why do it twice? And so, of course, Meryl Swanson, I think, has been very quiet in these times because she's going to cop criticism. And, of course, when NBN News covered that story, there were people saying, yeah, it would have been nice if you'd built the road a little higher. So there you go. But
I know these people get paid a fortune to plan this stuff, right? These people that all these committees, and they say, yeah, this will work, and then they're always proven wrong. It's the same with their health stuff. We know best, and they're always proven wrong. It's just ridiculous. You must have some amazing water birds out there, Jason.
Yeah, look, we certainly do. We also get kangaroos out the back in large numbers. It's just extraordinary to think that we're right on the cusp of a housing estate and farmland. And as you saw, there was some just beautiful views. I mean, we were lucky enough a few years ago to live on the lake on the Central Coast, and it wasn't for us, so we decided to move out. Then we were going to look at sort of beach land, and we actually decided to build and buy and do that. And after a while, it was too expensive. We thought that this doesn't achieve what we want to achieve. Like, why would you want a big mortgage to live by the beach? So we cancelled that, sold out, and we moved there where I think we've now got the best view of the lot. I mean, that view off the backyard there is look, one more time because I can. That is the view from my place. Yeah, beautiful hills there. I have stood out the front, and on the left of screen, I have seen lightning bolts come in through the mountain there that have been so thick they've been like telegraph poles. To give you an idea through the storms. But if you are lucky enough to live there, you don't really want to live anywhere else, that's for sure.
Yeah, it is a beautiful part of Australia. Incredible. Now, I want to tell you about something really interesting that came to my attention, Jason, because I think what a lot of us have been languishing under is excessive mind control. And I think it started years ago, right, when with all the advertising, and I was guilty of that. I was part of that. That's how I used to earn my living as an actress. I did ads for Ford cars, for Coca-Cola, for the big burger people. It's this repetitive thing with adverts. That's why you're watching a TV show, an ad comes on, and in the next ad break, it's the same one. It's the same one. It's the same one over and over and over. You're hungry. You want chocolates. You want burgers. You want to drive this car, blah, blah, blah. But there is now evidence that these things have been used in nefarious ways by governments around the world, obviously to do with the engineered pandemic. But something interesting has happened recently. There was a sort of documentary by a British mind control expert guy, Darren Brown. Now, I know this guy, I wouldn't say personally, but I know him and I've met him because before I came to Australia and was on a TV show, I was a well-known model in the UK, and I was asked to be one of his victims, let's say, for hypnosis up on a stage there in London in Tottenham Court Road. And I think it was called the Dominion Theatre. And he managed to, hypnotize me. Anyway, in this documentary that's been pulled now from Netflix, apparently it was pulled in 2022, his documentary is called The Push. Right. So it's still out there. It's just not on Netflix and it's not being advertised. And he talks about how all of these tools are available to anyone who wants to use them on mind control. So just the crux of this documentary, if you want to go and look at it, and it might sort of assist you, and there's others out there, might assist you to understand how easy this stuff is. There were basically 4 participants from the general public, right? And they're in a building, and on top of the building is a stuntman who's young. He's 20 years old. He's a stuntman, and he's sitting on the edge of the building with his feet dangling off the edge. But in makeup, he looks like a little old man, but inside he's young. Now, downstairs in the building, Darren Brown does all this mind control on these people to see how many out of the 4 will push this guy off the building. And obviously, when he goes, he's a stuntman and everything's there to catch him and everything's fine. And 3 out of the 4 regular people that Darren Brown hypnotized and used mind control on pushed the old man off the building. And that's why the documentary is called The Push. So it goes to exhibit that, given enough push, people will do things that they ordinarily wouldn't do. So absolutely fascinating. I haven't seen it. I'm going to go and watch it. I'm a bit nervous about watching anything with Darren Brown. But people are saying in America, it's sort of come up again in the news because it's been pulled, that this is the kind of stuff governments don't want the rest of us to know because it's stuff they've availed themselves of for a long time, Jason.
Derham, he freaks me out. He's just an incredible hypnotist, but you realise that if he's doing that in public, what's going on behind the scenes where necessary? Isn't it interesting what people will do? And so I think that is a good segue into this story that I want to bring up. Nicola, you shared a story about someone who's not very liked in the world, particularly on our side of the fence. His name is George Soros. I'm just going to take the banner off there below there, specifically talking about this deal where he agreed to buy into Channel 9's IPO, and that was a story from about 12 years ago, George Soros buying into the Australian news media market. The reason that I bring that up is that Soros is a character that likes to play both sides of the story. He wants to be a capitalist that plays to win, but he wants to be a philanthropist. So if you have to be amoral to make money, but be moral with the spoils of said money, what kind of character are you? So there are those that will defend Soros, and there are those that say how Soros is the reason, based on his religion, means that other people of the same religion are bad people as well, which I thoroughly do not accept. And the reason that that is the case will be exhibited in a clip I'm about to show. It's about 4 minutes long, but this is George Soros from 1998 on 60 Minutes, and it really goes to show who this person is. And I'll tell you what, there aren't many Jewish people like this guy.
In Eastern Europe, he's educated a new generation. And in Ukraine, he spent millions retraining the old Soviet military.
At the center of George Soros, there's an inherent contradiction.
Which is?
Which is, on one hand, you're the capitalist who does not care about the social consequences of his act, and on the other hand, you are a philanthropist who cares only about social consequences. How do you resolve the two?
Recognizing that as a competitor, I've got to compete to win. As a human being, I am concerned about the society in which I live.
Which George Soros am I talking to now? The amoral George Soros or the moral George Soros?
It's one person. It's one person who at one time engages in amoral activities and at the rest of the time tries to be moral.
To understand the complexities and contradictions in his personality, you have to go back to the very beginning, to Budapest, where George Soros was born 68 years ago to parents who were wealthy, well-educated, and Jewish.
When the Nazis occupied Budapest in 1944, George Soros' father was a successful lawyer. He lived on an island in the Danube and liked to commute to work in a rowboat. But knowing there were problems ahead for the Jews, he decided to split his family up. He bought them forged papers, and he bribed a government official to take 14-year-old George Soros in and swear that he was his Christian godson. But survival carried a heavy price tag. While hundreds of thousands of Hungarian Jews were being shipped off to the death camps, George Soros accompanied his phony godfather on his appointed rounds, confiscating property from the Jews.
These are pictures from 1944 of what happened to George Soros' friends and neighbors.
You're a Hungarian Jew who escaped the Holocaust by posing as a Christian.
Right.
And you watched lots of people get shipped off to the death camps.
Right. I was 14 years old. And I would say that that's when my character was made.
In what way?
That one should think ahead, one should understand and anticipate events, and one is threatened. It was a tremendous threat of evil. I mean, it was a very personal experience of evil.
My understanding is that you went out with this protector of yours who swore that you were his adopted godson.
Yes, yes.
Went out, in fact, and helped in the confiscation of property from the Jews.
That's right. Yes.
I mean, that sounds like an experience that would send lots of people to the psychiatric couch for many, many years. Was it difficult?
Not at all. Not at all. Maybe as a child you don't see the connection, but it created no problem at all.
No feeling of guilt.
No.
For example, that I'm Jewish, and here I am watching these people go. I could just as easily be there. I should be there. None of that.
Well, of course, I could be on the other side, or I could be the one from whom the thing is being taken away. But there was no sense that I shouldn't be there, because that was, well, actually, funny way, it's just like in markets, that if I weren't there, of course I wasn't doing it, but somebody else would be taking it away anyhow. In other words, whether I was there or not, I was only a spectator, the property was being taken away.
I just find that staggering. Now, I could have cut that interview, part of that, shorter and made him sound worse than he was, but I think you get the drift there. So the behavior of a Jewish person in the Holocaust who worked for the Nazis was called a capo. Somebody who actually worked against the Jewish people to save their own skin, which is pretty much what he did. He just approached it from a different way. In fact, he was a pioneer of being a capo. So I have no time for George Soros. And as you can see there, even though he couldn't save these people who were being shipped off, he wasn't warning them either and giving them ideas of how to save themselves. Now, it's one thing for us here in a completely different world going through this period of, of COVID and obviously what we know about the mRNA, etc., and providing warnings, and then putting our hands up years later saying we're unable to convince or save anyone's lives at this point. But yet we still go on with the business of doing it, and we still present our argument. And at the end of the day, we don't want anyone to be harmed, but at the same time, we also want justice. I can't say a good word about George Soros. I just can't find anything in me. He was cold, calculated, psychopathic, and if anything, was playing from this position of pretending that he was 14, but he knew what was going on at that stage and hasn't repented whatsoever. Nicola, how do you see that clip?
Well, he said very clearly in his own words that even though he was only 14, that's when his personality was set. So that's quite concerning, because what he was telling us there, literally, is that because he was under the threat of great evil, anything goes. So he has had a hand in putting billions of innocent people under the threat of great evil. And yet we're being told it's certainly not a case of anything goes. It's a case of you better go along to get along. So it's one rule for George Soros and another rule for everyone else. Now, at the beginning, the emergence of this engineered pandemic, I know that he purchased about 200 radio stations in the United States so he could control the narrative there. And obviously, he has investments in television networks in America. But I was very surprised to find when someone sent me the link that for a long time, since 2013, George Soros's hand, the man who aided in the persecution of others. Now, you've got to remember that anyone else that assisted the Nazis, that was anything to do with the Nazis, they were sent to trials at Nuremberg, even if it was just the media reporting on it, not actually taking place in it, part in it. They were either lost their lives or, well, I guess some of them were shipped away under Operation Paperclip. Who knows? Maybe George Soros is the outcome of Operation Paperclip by the US government. But he seems to now be able to walk through life and he's free to do anything. He has a lot to do with Nine Entertainment, or did have a lot to do with Nine Entertainment, which is, major media network in Australia. And that makes absolute sense to me as to why none of the narratives make sense. And it's this really, really important thing. And I've talked before about my own experiences with abuse. Sometimes people who are abused will spend the rest of their lives making sure that no one else goes through what they went through. And sometimes when people experience abuse, they become abusers. And it seems to me as an outsider that that's actually what's happened with George Soros. And I think anyone that would sit there brazenly, I don't care how much money you've got, and admit that you went along to get along and assisted the Nazis in harming your own people, should not have anything to do with, not a single public platform in Australia. And I think it's to Australia's great shame, and the government has allowed this, that a former Nazi sympathizer has anything to do with media narrative in this country.
Well said. You know, in front of me, I've got some scribbled notes that read victim becomes perpetrator or victim protects and prevents, which is exactly what I was going to add. And you've summarized it. Well, you've explained it perfectly. So we're on the same page exactly. And here, Soros has become the perpetrator and the worst kind. And what really bugs me is that there are Jewish people that are wearing the brunt of George Soros. And it is not a race thing. It is not a religious thing. It is the fact that is a psychopath who has had an absolute free reign to run, and he's now in his 90s and still going and handing over to his son Alex. It's just absolutely extraordinary. And the funny thing about his son is marrying Huma Abedin, who is a Muslim who has close ties to the Muslim Brotherhood. So what is that about? Are the Soroses really Jewish people, or are they just in name and get to use that almost to destroy the name of the Jewish people in the name of Soros? If you think that that's how you compare it, well, you've got to reassess that.
Well, all of these people, Jason, who came from that era and were indoctrinated by it. Look at the likes of Klaus Schwab. His father, Klaus Schwab's father, manufactured ammunitions for the Nazis, and they gave him an award for it. And the way he manufactured those ammunitions for the Nazis was with slave labor. These people weren't there by choice. So, you know, I cannot believe all these years later, that we're still dealing with people who were Nazi sympathizers. How come some of them got hung and some of them are buying up media companies and getting involved in society? I mean, George Soros's foundation is called the Open Society Foundation, and he's been very involved in a lot of unrest in America. And what are we starting to see in Australia, Jason? We're starting to see a lot of unrest, and some of the unrest that we're seeing in Australia is with migrants who are running around carrying machetes. Now, I'm assuming that these machetes weren't in their carry-on bags or in their checked-in luggage. So they're getting hold of these in Australia somehow. I'd like to know who's selling these migrants machetes. I've never really seen any for sale. And here's me thinking, Jason, that it's probably best to go through life not walking through shopping centers while spinning a machete around in my hand, because I can assure you, if it was me as a 30-year-old immigrant to this country, I would not be bailed and let off and given dispensation just for walking through a shopping center with a machete. And yet these people are wielding them. They're climbing into cars. They're pinning police officers to a wall. I want to tell you a story. There's a story that's broken in Melbourne this weekend where a female migrant driver drives and pins a police officer to a wall in a street, breaking his leg. He was clearly in agony, and he shot her to death. How he didn't shoot both the people in that car to death is anyone's guess. The passenger was a machete-wielding man who could have got out. The police officer, had he shot the passenger, I would imagine, have considered that was an imminent threat as well, because that person could exit the vehicle with a machete. But this person went to court the same day and was bailed in Melbourne. And I find this absolutely extraordinary, Jason, that these people are getting away with these crimes. And I'll tell you why. When I was on radio in Melbourne in 2018, 2019, I was asked to and started to look into public advocacy of people that were serving life sentences, young people who probably shouldn't have got a life sentence. One of the things that terrifies me the most is that there are people in jail who don't deserve to be there, and do we have the right to take their lives? And I came across two young men. Now the audience are not going to like the sound of these young men, but I would ask them to think about what's happened with them and what's happened in Melbourne this last weekend. These young men were part of groups of mates years ago in the 90s and the noughties. And both of these young men were the getaway drivers, if you like, in groups of men who, over drugs and gang stuff, were driving the car where other young males went into a building and killed people. Now, in two of these cases that came to me, the people that actually killed those individuals got less than life because the police caught them and they said, yes, it was me, and they got less than life. And both of the getaway drivers who said, no, I didn't kill anyone, I stayed in the car, so they did not admit to murder, even though they were the getaway driver, they got longer sentences than the people who actually knifed people to death. So I always thought that was a strange disparity in the Australian justice system, that the person who never actually put their hands on anybody got off scot-free. And how does that happen now, where the passenger in a car, so not the one with the steering wheel in the hand, but a machete-wielding person is bailed on the same day, and I could go down to a shopping centre near me now and come face-to-face with that person at a cafe? How does that work, Jason?
It is a very, very good question. What I think I might do is play you part of the Channel 7 report just to provide a bit of perspective, and then we'll show you the developments that have come since that from the Victorian government. Won't play the whole story, we'll just play some of it here for you now.
A machete-wielding man who triggered a police shooting in South Melbourne is tonight back on the streets after being given bail.
7 News has obtained pictures of the moment a getaway driver struck an officer, prompting him to open fire.
With one final lunge to stop a driver, an officer is pinned. He delivers 4 blows straight into the windscreen, the senior constable screaming in agony.
Mate, gunshots, man.
The officer opened fire after he was driven at while his offsider was cuffing a man, allegedly armed with a machete.
Yeah, 4 shots.
The 34-year-old woman behind the wheel of the stolen SUV was killed. Her passenger was also injured as the officer became wedged between the car and a fence.
Initially, he was yelling out to get the car off me, get the car off me.
The passenger tried to get out of the car as well. It looked like he tried to help the police officer for a second, but then he went to obviously see if his friend was okay.
Just 2 blocks from the local station, police swarmed Dow Street.
Oh, there's police everywhere. There's a car crashed into a house. Oh, someone's down.
A frantic scene at 5 yesterday afternoon.
There's now probably 10 police cars.
I personally don't think she was aiming for the police officer. I personally think she was aiming for the guy on the scooter.
Vehicle being driven at a police.
I just had to conclude that last little bit. I don't know how that person with the blurred face could say that she was aiming for the guy on the scooter. She drove straight into.
Like that was okay. There was a human being on a scooter, and it's okay because she wasn't aiming for the police. She was aiming for a human being.
Oh, it's extraordinary circumstances there, and we're playing that because it's obviously newsworthy and for the discussion of where we are. But it's the discussion that we're trying to deal with here. Like, how do you justify this? And I don't think anyone can. And then, ironically, what does Jacinda Allen announce this morning? Well, they're going to choke the supply of machetes after the Northlands shopping centre brawl, which was a separate incident. So what they're saying is that you can no longer purchase a knife with a blade longer than 20 centimetres. So that'll come into effect.
Yes, because they're used for beheading. This isn't like people have, flick knives and they can shank people quickly and, oh my God, they might bleed to death. This is a weapon that can behead someone. And I'll tell you what, Jason, the shopping centre story in particular exhibits to me. Firstly, we haven't heard, there was 10 people involved in that brawl in a public place with families around. We haven't heard if those 10 people have been bailed or arrested. I don't know if you've got details on that. But, this exhibits to me perfectly the false narrative that we as Australians have been given. The false narrative, Jason, that the surveillance state was to save us from crime.
Yes.
Because what's happening is the surveillance state is proving to us that it's not there to save us from crime, because it witnesses people in a shopping centre wielding a machete, and then I can guarantee you, if I as an Australian walked through a shopping centre just swinging it next to me, a big machete, you wouldn't hear from me for a very long time, Jason.
Yeah, it's a good point. Now, a question for our Queensland viewers. I've had people tell me that the incident of these by the side of the road speed camera radars have increased since David Crisafulli has become the Premier. So the Liberal government would normally have less safety cameras or speed cameras than Labor, but they've actually got more. So I'm interested there if there's any response in the comments, or perhaps email us. But that's something that I've heard, because isn't it interesting that when they can get you for a fine, and increase revenue, no problem in going that way. But when it comes to machete-wielding crazy criminals, we're getting bailed, and they should be in custody. So stories, ideas at thedailyaustralian@gmail.com. Would really appreciate that. Or, of course, just leave it in the comments.
These cameras are for revenue. Clearly, they are revenue generators. And again, this is like the Darren Brown thing. You know, they keep telling you it's for your safety. Do you feel safe with cameras there? Well, often I feel like, at least in public spaces like shopping centres and food courts, it does make me feel safer, but it shouldn't. Because even if someone attacks you with a giant machete or chases you away, they're likely to get bailed. I mean, what's going on with our court system, Jason? It's letting us down.
Yes, exactly. Now, on local news here last night, there was a story of a bike track in the Newcastle region, and they were talking about putting lighting and other security measures on this very dark road. And some locals are saying, well, you just don't ride there at night. Why would you ride your bike in the dark at night? It's ridiculous. But there's a public interest group that are calling, for lighting, and of course they're calling for more security cameras. Now, the particular lady who's running the organisation is saying that she doesn't think that that's the only reason. She says you need to get on a pathway of education. I thought, what do you need to educate people to not assault people on a bike track for? Like, that just doesn't make sense to me. But again, it's this weird psychology that somehow we want more cameras so that we can ride our bikes in an unsafe place. Who's riding their bike on a passageway that's surrounded by trees? Anyway, I just don't understand. If you're going to ride your bike at night,
safety. It gives people the false impression that you're safe, because that's the only thing. We have CCTV cameras were rolled out in London in the 90s to the point where it said, that not an inch wasn't covered, not a foot wasn't covered. So you could drive from one side of London to the other side, or walk or whatever, and you would be on camera at all times. But it didn't stop attacks. It didn't stop robberies. It didn't stop rapes. It didn't stop these things where they crash the car, ram rays, they used to call them, into shop windows and steal all the jewelry or the clothing or whatever. So for a long time, we've been psyoped into this idea that they're security cameras. And I have security cameras at my home. But what would happen if someone broke into my home and I caught it on security camera? If they were a migrant, would it mean they'll get bailed the same day? I mean, how helpful are security cameras for security, or are they just revenue generating machines? And it's very annoying. It's upsetting, because of course the most expensive cameras they use are for people on their phones in cars, or people speeding. I think there was even a camera they were rolling out that has ears, and if your V8 was too noisy, you would also get a ticket. It's becoming just so ridiculous. Law and order is not at all what we've been led to believe. We've been misled, in fact. And what do these governments say to us, Jason? We've got to be careful about misinformation and disinformation. Well, don't call them security cameras when they catch crime and you do nothing about it.
Absolutely. Or as my late mother used to say, they just keep the honest crooks out. She would say that with a tongue planted firmly in cheek. It's just ridiculous. Well, another story's broken in Sydney overnight. This one from Granville in Western Sydney in Church Street. Two men, one with links to the Alamedan crime gang and the other a solicitor, are fighting for their lives after they were shot in a public attack in Granville. Alamedan associate Dawood Zachariah was shot in the head, and legal professional, Sylvan Singh in the arm and leg. That's him there on the screen. When a gun opened fire on a white Toyota Hilux as they waited at a red light in Church Street in Granville under the M4 overpass about 5:10 p.m. Sunday. Witnesses said the car containing Zachariah, Singh and two other men was set upon as it waited at the busy intersection, which we'll show you here again, at the heart of Granville and Parramatta in Sydney's west. A court heard that Zachariah had been among a group targeted in a broad daylight shooting at Brighton Le Sands earlier in the year, in which no one was injured. He's now fighting for his life in a critical condition in hospital with multiple gunshot wounds, while Singh, who is understood to have been an innocent victim caught in the crossfire, was said to be in a stable condition.
Now, this all annoys me, Jason, because we were told, weren't we, for a long time by Mr. Klaus Schwab, the other Nazi sympathizer, that, this is going to become a more violent world. And what have we seen? It's been engineered to become a more violent world. Now, I said something the other day that might have upset a lot of people, but it is true that if you bring people into a previously predominantly peaceful nation, people who have integrity, or even if they're ruthless and they're here for economic gain, but then you mix them in with people from countries who are not as civilized, who have not had to adhere to strict laws. I mean, look at that footage from Melbourne. One of our police officers has been injured. This isn't just the general public that are being put at risk here. It's our serving officers as well. And it is absolutely engineered. As I said, I had to go through a lot of security checks with the FBI and Scotland Yard to be able to come and live and work and have my life in Australia. Now, some of these new migrants, not all of them, but some of these new migrants have straight away, they've got a criminal record. And what, they're allowed to stay? I mean, where's the legislation on that? I mean, how can it be one law for Australians and a different law for new Australians? Is that what we're looking at?
I'm so glad that you brought that up, because it seems that said precedent has been set in the United Kingdom. Now, this is a video that's emerged, and Nicola, I'm pretty sure you sent it to me or you've shared it on your page. I think this is worth playing again. Now, this is something that we've tracked back. It's around about March, I think this video was made, but the change in rules apparently took effect in April. But this is it, right? Let's play it for you now.
Something absolutely outrageous is going to happen on Tuesday. What has happened is something that is going to undermine justice in the United Kingdom for many months, if not years to come, possibly permanently. It should never have been allowed to happen. What has happened, and it shames me to say this, being a Brit, from a country, from a nation that has been known for decades, if not centuries, as a bastion of fairness and equality before the law. What has happened is that an unelected group of individuals called the Independent Sentencing Council has issued guidelines to judges in this country that mean, in effect, from Tuesday, that white men are going to be treated more harshly by the courts than any other group in society. They have been effectively singled out for harsher treatment. The fact that this has happened should shock every man, woman and child living in these islands. The Sentencing Council is an abomination. The Sentencing Council...
Yeah.
Extraordinary, isn't it? So that's this statement. So what we did was we did a little digging, and we've come up with this statement here. This is from Shabana Mahmood, an MP, the Lord Chancellor and Secretary of State for Justice, who actually wrote to the sentencing group. And this is the quote. It is firstly important to note that this government does not deny there is a difference in sentencing outcomes for ethnic minorities. The disparity is clearly real. I love the way they say clearly real, so there's no evidence, and it is the responsibility of government to address it. However, it is in this government's policy to oppose differential treatment on the basis of race or ethnicity in our courts. Doing so offends the principle of fair treatment before the law. In relation to the imposition guidelines, I consider that encouraging a judge to request a pre-sentencing report for one named cohort but not another amounts to differential treatment. So what are we dealing with there when you have the person agreeing with the sentiments, a bit like agreeing with climate change, and but not actually looking at the studies? It's a bit like saying safe and effective without reading said study. And so there is a reason why that there is certain people in prison. If you don't look at ethnicity, you simply address the crime. Justice is meant to be blind. So if justice is behaving in a certain way, that if you then assess said races of people, ethnic minorities, religions, etc., that are incarcerated, then you discover that there is a difference. you can't then say, well, that's unfair. We're going to rebalance it by locking up more white people to make people feel better about who's committing crimes. It is
Isn't
just
that
an
a green
abomination
light,
of an idea.
Jason? That's a green light to migrants and minorities that we get softer treatment. You know, you've got British people in jail. One of them died in jail, a 61-year-old man, for a Facebook post. In Australia, we had a pregnant woman hauled off during the pandemic because she made a Facebook post or joined a group. So, you know, you don't need to ask if this is actually being implemented in the real world. It is. We can see it being implemented, and I think it's a very, very dangerous thing. Look, I think nationals in our countries, the OGs, I call them, the original gangsters in our countries, we've been treated very poorly. I mean, you know, a stat came out this morning that I was hoping to share on the show. I'll share it now. That now we've reached the number in the UK, 10,000 vaccine damaged Brits have been denied payments for being vaccine damaged by the UK government. And the way the figures currently stand, the UK government has paid more money to the consultants who assess claims for vaccine damage than they've actually paid to the vaccine damaged. Isn't that sad?
Goodness me, just it never ends, does it? Just one after another, after another, after another, and we're wondering why we're losing our minds. Now, another interesting take, and I want to get your opinion on this, and again for our viewers, etc. There's a story that appeared on Murdoch Press today, and it was literally holding #1 position for a while, about this particular fellow from Kalgoorlie being interviewed by a British tourist and a blogger, and the story contains the headline, "Risks Reinforcing Harmful Stereotypes, the Mayor's Response to a Viral Conversation." So a West Australian mayor has criticised the depiction of his city's First Nations community in a video that described it as Australia's roughest outback town. He's criticised this British YouTuber's depiction of this city's First Nation community. Regarded as the state's mining capital, Kalgoorlie Boulder is located in the Goldfields Esperance region, and has an Indigenous population of about 4,397 compared to 29,100 non-Indigenous residents. And last week, this YouTuber, Wendell Explores, shared a 26-minute video with his 142,000 subscribers titled "Drunk in Australia's Roughest Outback Town." So they're basically smearing this person and saying that his treatment of this particular individual was poor. So what I've done is I've cut the 1 minute 37 part of the interview where he talks specifically to this man. And when we come back, Nicola, I'm going to ask you for what your attitude is towards this person. Is he treating him poorly, or is this mayor really playing the fiddle here to sort of perpetuate this story? Here's the video.
I'm just an alcoholic. Are you an alcoholic, are you, my friend? Yeah.
Yeah.
How long has that been the problem?
Since I was 18.
So how do you spend your days?
Just sometimes I have a quiet days, sometimes just too much on the drink.
Too much drink, yeah. Why do you have to drink all the time? What makes you?
Nothing much to do around here. Only thing is just that.
Yeah. No chance of work in the mines, or?
Nah.
Do you have housing, or do you sleep rough?
I sleep rough.
Do you, mate? Yeah. And how long have you slept rough?
In the street for 2 years.
Oh, mate, yeah. Yeah, you banged your head as well. Dangerous, yeah?
Yeah, I tripped over, missed a step.
Oh, my friend. Really?
Yeah.
I thought someone had hit you, but that's a nasty scar, my friend.
Yeah.
That's painful, yeah?
Yeah.
When did you do that?
2 nights ago.
Oh, brother, yeah.
2 or 3. Well, I've been keeping well, out of trouble.
Yeah.
Doing all right. Trying to slowly. Don't know when I'll go back and see me kids.
Where are they?
Kids stay in Midland.
Okay.
Area.
Perth area, yeah.
Still be drinking there.
Mate, yeah. Yeah, you got to try and drink less, mate, yeah. I know it's hard.
Problem.
Do you get hangovers anymore, or you just drink all the time? You feel okay?
Drink every time.
Yeah. So you drank already today?
I'll be going soon.
So That story video made headlines because he just threw the throwaway remark in that you've got to drink a little bit less, like any other human being would say in a situation where you're talking to a person who's just banged their head because they tripped over because they were drunk. And yet this person's been attacked for offending said individual. How dare you say to this person in the street that you've interviewed that you should slow your drinking down? That's the attitude that we're at today. So it's almost as if the offence of offending someone to help them save their own bacon, their own backside, their own skin is bad. But at the same time, the government, who are now our rulers, even though, well, they're not, but they think that they are, will do anything they possibly can to protect you for your safety, including injecting you. But this individual blogger can't say to this poor bloke on the side of the street, maybe just drink a little less, just as a throwaway remark. How do you take that?
I always find when I see the Indigenous population, particularly in the north of Australia, interviewed, I always find it heartbreaking. It's reminiscent of that video of that very tall girl. I think she had a pink sweatshirt on during the pandemic, and a guy in a ute pulled over and he videoed and he said, "Did they make you get the injection?" And she said, "Yeah, Pfizer." And he said, "How much did they give you, mate?" And she goes, 500 for the jab. And that's when I fell apart and I really became resolute. No, you are not going to get away with this, because I know exactly what they're doing. For my money, this is a form of ethnic cleansing that is going on with the Indigenous tribes in Australia. Now, I don't care what you believe about the Indigenous tribes, who they are, where they're from. These people should be valued. And the only value these people have got for governments is to assist in their agenda to seize land. Now, the reason there is uproar about that clip is because that podcaster in those few minutes gave more of a shit about that bloke than any mayor or any council or any heritage entity has given about those people in a very long time. We know that there are these Aboriginal councils. Some of them, Jason, get $1 billion a year to take care of these people. And there's corruption within the councils. The money disappears. People don't get help. That person hasn't got anywhere to sleep. He's got nothing to look forward to. Nothing
for 2
to look
years
forward
on
to.
the streets. Yep.
I'm telling you now, the reason they're upset about that is because they don't want people, because I don't fly anymore, right? Because of the medical intervention and pilots. And I've lost work because of that. But also, we don't drive for weeks and weeks. This is a big landmass up to the Northern Territory. So we rely on people up there to send us videos and information. And I think no matter how hard something is to look at, you have to look at it, because you can't change anything or do any good. I found that very upsetting. And unless you are able to look at it and acknowledge it. That guy is not living his best life like people in the city. You know, he's not having a great time, and he seems lovely. He hasn't done anyone any harm. And there's no one caring about him, and they'd really rather that wasn't highlighted. So I take my hat off to that guy, and he did care about him. You could hear him call him his brother. What's going on with you? You know, this isn't someone who's laughing at these people. I'll tell you who's laughing at these people. All of those money laundering from this money that's being allocated every year, and it's not going anywhere. The kinds of money that have gone in the name of these people to help them could have built mansions and towns and homeless shelters up the yin yang. You could have built hundreds of them for that money. Oh, we're building for the new Australians, for the migrants who don't seem to have to adhere to our laws, but we're not building any shelter for the Indigenous Australians. And they stand there, their filthy rhetoric, their word salad, they disgust me, telling us that we don't care enough about Aboriginal sacred lands, and we should have said yes to the voice to Parliament, when really they just want to mine the hell out of their land. There is living proof there, and not the only one, of someone who's received no help from you people. You're liars.
So the Aboriginal corporation is taking the money, and you've got Aboriginal citizens sleeping rough on the street. And last week we covered the story of those two individuals who were told that they had to destroy their tiny home on a farm or face fines of some ridiculous amount of money. What was it? $10,000?
$1 million.
$1 million. There you go. So if you're thinking that government is the solution, you are absolutely wrong. Government is the problem. And you can trace that back to the money chain, the money supply, and situations where you have an innocent blogger from the UK going out to Kalgoorlie and turning his phone around or his camera and talking to a local citizen on the street with a cut on his head to find out about his life, to share that word. And that tells you that citizen journalism is alive and well, and citizen journalism will be the answer. And any government that wants to censor citizen journalists and mayors and politicians, you're the problem. And anyone who wants to rule over us, well, that is yet another line in the sand that we can continue to fight. Just absolutely extraordinary. Very different show again today on the Daily Australian. It's evolving before your eyes to take a format here. And I think you can get the sense now that what we're trying to do also is to be the best possible journalists that we can be and commentators by presenting as often as we can both sides of the story and let you decide. And I hope that this format is going to encourage you again to keep commenting, sharing, etc. Because the only way that journalism works is that more people see it. And if they don't see it, if it's a private clip that just entertains and feeds, well, that's probably why we get a bit down on ourselves if not enough people are seeing it, and we wonder what the purpose of it all is. But I think today I think we've turned a corner again, Nicola.
There's a clip that goes around on social media, and it's quite wonderful, but my phone will never let me save it. And as soon as I've watched it, it disappears, and I'm not quick enough. And it's this creepy lady that looks like a wolf. She's got like these, those pale blue eyes. They're phenomenal, some of these human beings that pop out the way they look. And I just want to read to you what she says in the clip, because I managed to write it down because I couldn't save the clip. It obviously won't let me for a reason, because I might play it on the show. And this is just some of the things, some of the journey that we've been through when you talk about mind control and social change and social engineering by someone like George Soros and his Open Society Foundation. By the way, he owns a lot of mining rights in Australia, so he would have put a lot of money into the no vote for the Voice of Parliament referendum, because seizing ancient lands for mining would have benefited George Soros. So in this clip, she says, and she's mimicking what we've been told over the last 5 years, "We need you to stay in your home just for 2 weeks. It's for the greater good. We need you to close your business. It's just for a few weeks. It's for the greater good. We need you to wear this on your face. It's for the greater good. We need you to wear 2 of these on your face. It's for the greater good. We need you to inject this into your body. It's for the greater good. We need you to spend Christmas, the holidays, alone. It's for the greater good. We need you not to eat this anymore because it's bad for the environment. It's for the greater good. We need you to stop driving your car and flying. It's for the greater good. We need you to stop heating your home. It's for the greater good. We need you to stop saying that. It's offending some people. It's for the greater good. We need you to stop having children. It's not good for the planet. It's for the greater good. We need you to stop. We need you to stop talking about your faith. It's offending people. It's for the greater good. We need you to separate you from your children because you're not complying. It's for the greater good. We need to hold you in a facility for just a while longer. It's for the greater good, aka Jacinta Ardern. So you can see from the beginning of the narrative she's sharing there, it starts off small, 2 weeks to flatten the curve. And eventually what we're doing in society is we're accepting measures and we're accepting top-down control that in 2018, 2019, if I'd reported that on radio, Jason, I would have been laughed at.
And this is the arrival of the totalitarian state in real time. And so it's the concept of hive mind versus free will in real time. This is the process politically of being able to distill an idea down to a binary scenario. Free will, hive mind, totalitarianism versus freedom, etc. And you've described it beautifully there, of that enormously horrific slippery slope. I don't know if you got a chance last night to have a look, and I know you don't watch mainstream news, but 60 Minutes covered a story on Diddy, and it was it was obscene. But
God.
what they did was they interviewed his assistant, who gave up some incredible information.
Wow.
And they also interviewed some victims, etc. So it seems that 60 Minutes is preparing that they expect a conviction. It's almost impossible at this point for him to not be convicted. However, I found it interesting that the particular charges that they're going after, such as sex trafficking, etc., they believe will be harder to prove. However, it's just the weight of evidence at this point. It's almost beyond a reasonable doubt to anyone who would be in the room listening to what is going on. So this is an interesting point. So whether or not they're going to throw the trial to let him off, I don't think they can, because they had this Tony Busby lawyer, and he has got literally hundreds of civil cases lining up. And they believe that if they get a criminal conviction, there will be thousands of cases coming. So at the end of the day, there'll be no money left in the Diddy empire. That's gone.
Good. Good.
Exactly.
I mean, surely, when his girlfriend Jason talked about rooms underneath and people that Diddy said, "Oh, I own them, don't go into that room." And she said she saw chains and handcuffs on the wall. That's like a slave owner, whether it be sex slave or even, any other kind of slave. Surely they can confirm that by just going underneath his property and they'll see the rooms.
Exactly. Where, of course, I'm going with this is that it sets the scene now that once this is over and done with, you would expect Epstein information to drop, because now people are saying that Diddy's worse than Epstein. Well, we don't know all the Epstein information, do we? So that's going to flip the lid on that. So it makes sense that those in the FBI would be waiting for this trial to take place. And if Tony Busby's right, and he's going to get hundreds, if not thousands of people coming forward as victims over 30 years. This is an industrial size operation. And so everyone's now ducking for cover. I find it just absolutely extraordinary. Now, some other information, just a little bit of American news as we get to the end of the show. I just want to give you this. This is Donald Trump yesterday talking about the big, beautiful bill now going to the Senate. So what he's saying is he's encouraging the Senate to make the changes that they want to the bill, as several members have floated additional spending cuts and then send it back to the House. In some cases, these changes may be something I'd agree with. To be honest, it just happens. I'll play a little bit of that clip for you now.
Republicans have said there are going to be significant changes to the budget bill. Well, I want the Senate and the senators to change, to make the changes they want, and we'll go back to the House and we'll see if we can get them. In some cases, those changes maybe are something I'd agree with, to be honest. It happens. But we've had a very good response from the Senate, and I don't know how Democrats can't vote for it. If they don't vote for it, they're talking about a 68% tax increase. Remember that. If the Democrats don't vote, it's a 68% tax increase, which is ridiculous.
A little bit there, a little bit soft in the audio. Apologies for that. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett, there's a person who's got some tickets on herself. She believes that the Democrats are going to win back the House next year, and she plans to lead the Oversight Committee. So guess what she can do? Investigate Donald Trump. Let's take a look at this character.
If the Democrats take over after the midterms next year, the House and or Senate, do you think they're going to push for investigations into Trump's family and the whole crypto acquisitions that he is getting?
Well, Alex, I'm glad you asked.
Oh, here we go.
Listen, so long as we end up taking the House, which I fully anticipate that we will do, and we are going to work hard to obviously help our Senate colleagues as well, then as someone who serves on the Oversight Committee and hopes to lead the Oversight Committee, I can guarantee you that we will do what we are supposed to do as constitutionally sworn members of the House, which means that we will conduct oversight. That means that we will investigate. We will look at whether or not this president himself has violated the emoluments clause as it relates to, say, such things as getting a $400 million million plane from the Qataris. We also will make sure that we're looking into all these business deals that they have going on. I mean, think about it this way, Alex. They were going after Hunter because he sat on a board. Think about how much money they are raking in, whether we're talking about the next golf resort that they're setting up in Qatar, or whether we're talking about them leveling Gaza, as they've talked about, and talked about how it would be great beachfront property, whether we're talking about this crypto scam, the scam that people didn't even want to walk into and show their faces. Let me tell you, there is no shortage of things for us to dig into and determine whether or not there have been not only violations of the law, but definitely violations of our Constitution as a whole.
Did you make...
What's
Jasmine,
this? What's
Jasmine
this?
Crockett, that's right. I'm trying
What's
to hear
this?
the cuckoo noise.
Such
in
a
the background.
liar. This is the
Ugh.
person investigating the commander-in-chief. So two things I caught her on: massive liars, like Donald Trump did not receive a $400 million plane from the Qataris. The country did.
Mhm.
And he is, people are not upset with Hunter Biden for being on the board of Burisma in Ukraine, even though that was totally corrupt. They're upset because he's a crackhead child abuser, who has kids with strippers, denies it, and won't pay child support. He's a deadbeat dad loser. And he left cocaine in the White House. But yeah, these people, the way they sit on the moral high ground, and they're like, "Oh, we're going to sort out Donald Trump." I can tell you now, someone who sits there with that level of aggression, who says they're going after Donald Trump, there's a knock at the door, and it's the assistant of George Soros, and here's quite a lot of money.
It seems to be, doesn't it? Well, my intuition tells me that there is a setting up of the economic platform before the great collapse. Now, people will say, "Oh, yeah, we've heard all this before in terms of the collapse." Well, you don't get a Diddy trial that's turning up on 60 Minutes and the Epstein files just about to drop, and all of the corruption that's being exposed, and of course the Democrats pretending that Burisma was nothing, Hunter Biden didn't do a thing, and we've got the auto pen, etc., etc. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. And I'll tell you who is my enemy are the globalists, and Ursula von der Leyen is probably number one. This is a situation right here. So Donald Trump has received a call from von der Leyen, president of the EU Commission, requesting an extension on the deadline of the 50% tariff with respect to the trade and the EU. So he agreed to an extension to July 9. He's privileged to do so. The Commission president said that talks will begin rapidly. So in other words, they're going to try and reduce said tariffs, which of course we know that that's what it is. This is the art of the deal, the negotiation. And there's von der Leyen. Good call with the president. So we know that von der Leyen and Trump are sworn enemies. And this is how it's played out on the stage. Optics are everything. The EU and US share the world's most consequential and close trade relationship. Europe is ready to advance talks swiftly and decisively to reach such a good deal. We need time until July 19. So,
do you know what I think's happening, Jason?
Go on.
Do you know what I think's happening? Ursula von der Leyen is the unelected president of the European Parliament.
Mhm.
But I think she's the unelected dictator of Europe. Because why is Ursula von der Leyen, an unelected person, talking with the elected commander-in-chief of the USA? It disappoints me that Trump would know this and not highlight this. But the way democracy, or lack of it, has been set up in Europe means that this woman that no one voted for, and if any of the actual voted European members of that parliament talk about her or speak in a fashion she doesn't agree with in that parliament, she cuts their microphone. That's a dictator. You may not talk about me that way. You may not talk about what's going on that way. So you're telling me the woman who wouldn't release her text messages with Pfizer after giving them billions and billions of euros, you're telling me that she's now discussing how to deal with the Trump tariffs. Who is this woman? This is the woman that if Australia adheres to the World Health Organization treaty, this is the woman who's going to dictate to you what's going to happen with your children's health. She's very much seemingly picked up the baton from Klaus Schwab. I find this all very, very concerning, Jason, because it feels like we don't have Prime Minister Keir Starmer. We don't have a Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese. What's the first thing that Anthony Albanese does when he got re-elected? jumps on his plane to go over there to Brussels to get his marching orders and told how it's going to be. So then we don't have a prime minister, right? He's not the prime minister of the Commonwealth. We're taking our orders from Ursula von der Leyen, who isn't elected by anyone and certainly not elected by anyone in Australia.
And this is why I think it's so interesting, because we know that Trump is the sworn mortal enemy of the globalists, and von der Leyen and Trump are mortal enemies. So when they put that out there, he is doing this knowing he's going to defeat them in both economics, because it's a better deal for America, but he's also setting the scene up so that when these people go down, these systems are in place. They can't say that we're going to have to change it. It's already done. You did it on your own, and therefore that's what it's about. So they're going to have to negotiate that agreement. I find it fascinating because I know that this is changing. This is the whole point of it, because at the end of the day, if Trump really is just controlled opposition and is just setting it out there, why not just let Hillary win in 2016 and be done with it, for goodness sake? You don't go down this pathway for this to happen the way that it is, and Trump certainly doesn't take his orders from Brussels. Another story I want to get to quickly, because we're going to run out of time. This is a really interesting one here. So you get this headline from The Guardian: Labor's tweak to super affects only the wealthiest Australians. To argue against it is misguided. Patrick Commons. A ferocious campaign is trying to discredit the policy, which addresses a real problem. No wonder reform is so hard in this country. So that's The Guardian. Then you have Robert Gottliebsen, who only a couple of weeks ago said the unrealised gains tax has been carefully designed by Treasury so it can be extended to all investment assets and maybe one day the family home. So that's the Australian mainstream media on both sides of the fence arguing two very different outcomes. So is Commons just another stooge doing the bidding for his boss, technically, by being a PR department for the government? Or is Robert Gottliebsen a conspiracy theorist now and arguing something that won't happen? What do you think?
I think that somebody somewhere was given permission for an economic war against Australians for 10 years. I'm going to refer to this on my podcast as the 10-year war. From 2020 to 2030, at least, these people have been given free rein to pillage us financially, also our rare earth minerals, our coal, our gas. Australia's being raped. That's not too strong a word. Australians are not benefiting from that. A whole host of other people are. We know they're obsessed with resources, but someone signed this, someone did this, probably someone who wears a crown. And it's absolutely disgusting, and we're only halfway through it. So if you consider the damage that's already been done to Australia between 2020 and 2025, my bank account betrays a lot of that damage. And imagine what could be done further between 2025 and 2030. These are people that we need to expose, because they may have the money, they may have the resources, they may have the power and authority to sign that permission slip, right? That hall pass to go and attack Australia. But the one thing these people are afraid of is being exposed. And we must try harder and dig harder to find out if there's any whistleblowers out there who've seen anything, who photographed any documents, who know anything. I would implore you to whistleblow, even anonymously, to this show, because the one thing these people fear is exposure. Because America is now a lifeboat and Trump is trying to save America. But for the rest of us, we have a situation where we've got criminals governing the innocent. Criminals are governing the innocent. That's not sustainable. Even if we lose everything, that's not sustainable. Because if we do lose everything, Jason, and we end up in a place where we need them, and they turn around and say, get lost, what's going to happen to Australia?
It's very true, but I tell you what, when you've got nothing left to lose, things certainly change. So it's obvious that people are in the phase of protecting what they have, and that's why there are certain strategies to play it a certain way, but it gets to a stage where you can't do that anymore. But who would have thought that this is the pathway down, we're just going backwards further and further, and we're made to feel guilty for certain things. We're also made to think that we have to live in a two-tier legal society now because we have to even it up when the baddies complain that there's too many of a certain type of person being incarcerated. It's just an extraordinary, ridiculous
Maybe it's
argument.
because they're committing the crime. Maybe they're incarcerated or not bailed because they're committing the crime. Has anyone ever thought about that?
Exactly the point. But and of course, wealthy people can have better defence lawyers. I know that there was a case many years ago that John Singleton got off a speeding ticket doing 160 k's in his Bentley or Rolls Royce because he argued that the car was built to be able to do that speed, and walked away from the court, which got people upset. And of course, it was a ridiculous argument, but the magistrate, agreed with him and let him off. But could you imagine if the rest of us were driving at 160 k's an hour and would use the same argument? We would all be laughed out of court. So that was an example there of what one might argue is an abuse of power or an abuse of privilege. But then you go to the other end of the spectrum and arguing that we need more white people in jail to balance it up is no argument whatsoever. But this is where we are today. Well, look, we've caught authority, the mayor in Kalgoorlie looking like a fool. We've caught von der Leyen doing something similar with her dictates. We've caught George Soros out today behaving in a way that is unacceptable, and the wrong people being blamed for it. I think today, in the balance of things, I give my show very high marks, as I hope you do, Nicola. I think we have done a great job here on the Daily Australian.
We absolutely have. I get a bit bashful about self-congratulating stuff, but I'll just let you do that. I can tell you now, though, I am about to post my wanted ad, and I think the time has arrived. I'm going to post a wanted ad for an antique and hopefully a very rusty pitchfork, and I'm going to check that the forks are extremely rusty at the tip. Jason, thank you so much for watching the Daily Australian with myself, Nicola Charles, and my co-host and co-producer, Mr. News himself, Jason Olbourne. Right at the end of the show, I've lost the ability to speak. We will do this all over again tomorrow.